Wow, people. Cool.
How are you doing, Zach?
Doing great.
It's
Doing
lovely
fantastic.
To see you. Thank you for coming. Have you been to Edinburgh before, Scotland before? Is this your
Never
first time?
been to, well, I've been to Scotland before, but I'd never been to Edinburgh before. I was in Glasgow in December. We did a couple of, I periodically do Gremlins Christmas screenings here in the UK. I did some at the Prince Charles Cinema in London in 2015, 2016, and then last year I did a kind of a 10-city UK tour, 10 cities in 10 nights, and we ended in Belfast and then Glasgow the last night. And in Glasgow, the Glaswegians gave us 2 sold-out shows, actually 800 tickets on a Sunday night. It was kind of amazing for a 34-year-old movie. So thank you, anyone. Some of the people have come up and said they were there, so thank you for coming and attending. It was a lot of fun.
And we've got a gremlin.
We do. Do we?
waved at
Do we?
you. Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
that's it.
there he is. There's one now. Looks familiar, for sure. A little smaller than the actual gremlin, but that's okay.
So when you first read the script, got the part, did you ever envisage that like 34 years on, you'd still be doing screenings and it would be, I mean, it's such a cult classic, right? Everybody loves it.
Well, I thought it was going to be a hit at the time, just purely because it was kind of really just a math problem, because Spielberg had done E.T. It was the most successful movie of all time. He had an amazing track record. He did Jaws, which was like maybe the third most successful movie ever made. So I figured, even if Gremlins was 1/10 as popular as like E.T. was, it would still make like $100 million. So you just figured with his track record, I mean, how bad really could it be? I mean, even if it bombed, it would probably do well. So I figured it would be a hit. But I am pretty astounded by the longevity of it. I would never have believed that, 3.5 decades after we shot it, I'd be traveling all over the world, still talking about it, and still having, not only people in their 70s and 50s and 40s, but also, young kids that are now 7, 8, 9, 10. Their parents are showing them the movie and passing it down, to which I thank you immensely for passing it down to the new generation of Gremlins fans. And it's just fun that the movie still holds up enough so that people seem to really enjoy it. I mean, in certain ways, it's arguably bigger today than it was when it came out, really. Certainly in terms of its reputation, and in terms of the way that it has penetrated the culture. I mean, the word gremlin or gremlins, when it came out, it was kind of a forgotten term from like the 40s and 50s. Gremlins were originally supposedly little creatures that messed up airplanes during World War II, and it was just kind of like a World War II expression. It had faded away, and then now gremlins, I mean, I'll be reading the Wall Street Journal or something like that, and someone will say something, embedded in an article about Wall Street or something, they'll say, well, blah, 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 and the stocks go down, but maybe, we don't want to feed them after midnight. And you're like, whoa, wait a second. The rules, a lot of those things are kind of embedded now into the culture, into things like, things that you would see just around. People make references to it all the time. They'll say something like, don't get them wet, or something like that. You'll be like, what? Hey, whoa, that's the movie. What's like, so the extent to which it's penetrated and permeated the culture is pretty impressive.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's super cool for a 35-year-old film. I'll tell you all a very short, brief story just to kind of how trippy it is for me, because like a lot of things, it kind of ebbs and flows in terms of its popularity. So it came out in '84, and then Gremlins 2 was in 1990. So I would say, and Gremlins 2 didn't really do all that well. Kind of bombed, quite honestly, and kind of killed the franchise a little bit. So by the mid '90s, the whole sort of Gremlins thing had kind of, I wouldn't say it had faded, but it was definitely kind of muted. Then starting around '98, '99, of course, you have sort of the internet really making its presence start to be felt. And by the mid-2000s, nerd culture is really starting to take off. And in the last 15 years, maybe 10 years, probably more accurate, the resurgence of anything having to do with the 80s, Stranger Things is a perfect example, But the triumvirate of Gremlins, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future is just, those three movies are so, they make almost every list that you can think of about best 80s movies. And so I was in Las Vegas about maybe 2 years ago, and I was staying there. I was doing like a toy convention there, because doing conventions is fun and it's profitable and it's just nice to meet the fans and everything like that. And so they put us up in a hotel, obviously. And so I was coming down, and in order to get to the car park, I had to walk through the casino. So I come down through the casino, and out of the corner of my eye, I see something, and I turn and I look, and it's this huge, like slot machine. You know, they used to pull the one-arm bandit thing, but now you just press the buttons. Enormous slot machine next to the wall. It's a Gremlin slot machine. And it's like playing little snippets from the movie, and I walk over to it, and it's like, if you get, 1, 2, 3, 4 gizmos, you get the jackpot. If you get like 1, 2, 3, 4 of me, you get like a higher jackpot. So I'm looking, going, this is crazy. And as I walk away, I turn around and I look, and there's there are two other machines sort of matching it like big pillars against the wall. And one of them was Gremlins, the other one was The Wizard of Oz, and the other one was Lord of the Rings. So you just stop and you think to yourself, that at least here, they're put on like an equivalent plane where it's like, so you stop and you go, are you trying to tell me that I'm sort of like kind of like in the 80s version of The Wizard of Oz? Like that is what's happened to my life, is that I'm in a movie that's like The Wizard of Oz. So it's just, it hits you. You see these cultural things. I don't decide them. You guys decide them. The culture decides them. So when I see those kind of things like that, that's just like, wow. Gremlins, Wizard of Oz, Lord of the Rings, there it is right in front of you. It's just, that's the culture telling you where you stand. You know what I mean? So it's just like, wow. And there are more, I won't belabor the point, but there are more and more examples that you see of that, where you see Gremlins placed along all of these other amazing movies, and you're just like, how is that possible? It's just amazing, really.
But it's an amazing film.
Well,
it's awesome, isn't it, right?
You know what it really is? It's a very well-crafted movie. It's a very, very well-directed, very well-crafted movie, and it does something that's very, very difficult to do, which is it balances the horror with the comedy, with like kind of strange, violence out of nowhere, and then it's like mixed with like, Phoebe's dad getting stuck in the chimney, and you're like, what? Where did that come from? And so it like makes you laugh. It makes you it doesn't really make you cry, but it makes you go, what the heck? And it pulls you in all sorts of different directions, but it doesn't do it in a kind of like, that's stupid, where does that come from tonal way. The tonal balance, between the light and the dark and the scary and the funny and I mean, what other movie does a woman get murdered when she gets thrown through a window? And everyone goes, yeah, murder her. It's amazing. Mrs. Deagle, I'm so glad she's dead. I mean, that's an amazing movie. Makes you have that kind of reaction, And then they do something really violent like that. And then Joe Dante does something really clever, which is cuts to the shot of like her red shoes. And you go, oh, Wicked Witch, I get it. Yeah, Miss D, yeah, sure. Sure. And Polly Holliday, very similar to Margaret Hamilton's character. I mean, but deliberately. Because Joe Dante always used to kind of say that Gremlins was, it's a wonderful lizard of Oz in hell, is what he kind of called Gremlins, right? He even throws It's a Wonderful Life in there, right? It's my mom's watching it on the TV, and he's like, hi, movie house, that whole clip and everything like that. And Kingston Falls is deliberately designed to kind of look like the Jimmy Stewart town, and I'm kind of deliberately designed to be sort of like the Jimmy Stewart, every man kind of, hi mom, hi dad, I'm home kind of thing, which is very like 1940s, 1950s Hollywood. So it was all very kind of cleverly done by design, by Joe Dante, who's very, very shrewd student of film. So, you're not going to beat him at film Trivial Pursuit ever. It's just not going to happen. He has a library of something like 1,000 actual movies at his house, and he's seen something like 30,000 movies in his lifetime, and he just memorizes everything. So he's like, put a little there, and put a little this, and put a little there. And I actually used to play with him on the set a little bit about it, and it actually spawned one of the more popular scenes. We were walking through the department store, and I saw a chainsaw on the wall. And I said, "Oh, is that your Tobe Hooper tribute?" Meaning who's the director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And he goes, "Actually, as a matter of fact, it is." Because that's Joe has kind of a squeaky voice like that. And I go, "Yeah, wouldn't it be cool if I grabbed that baseball, but then I had the little baseball bat thing? Wouldn't that be cool if there's like a baseball bat chainsaw fight between like me and the gremlin? Wouldn't that be an awesome idea?" And Joe goes, "Give me about 5 minutes," and turns around and he walks away. I'm like, "What's going on?" And that's when we came up with the baseball bat chainsaw fight on the spot, right there, and just decided that we were going to do it and choreograph it like right there on the spot, and just shot the whole thing. Just off an offhand comment that I made as a joke about him, always putting film references in his movies, which he does. And Gremlins 2 there's like 90 film references in it or something insane like that. You can go through it and watch it over and over again. You're like, "Oh yeah." Gremlins, there's a time machine reference if you watch really closely, where my dad's at the thing. He's at like a convention and he calls home, and in the right corner of the movie there's people sitting in a time machine, and then it cuts back to like my mom talking to him on the phone, and when it cuts back, the time machine is gone and people are on the floor looking at it like where it's gone. Did you ever catch that one? Did you catch that one? You can go back and watch it. You'll see. It's kind of funny. He has all sorts of stuff happening in the background of the frames that you have to just go back and watch everything really closely. You'll pick up all these inside jokes in Gremlins 1 and particularly in Gremlins 2.
I feel like I'm going to have to go home and watch that tonight. I'm
Yeah.
only going to get back at like 11 o'clock at night, and
Yeah.
I'm going to be like, "Right, Paul, we're watching Gremlins." And he'll be like, "What?" But shh. And I'll write them all down, and then I'll message you and say,
Yeah.
"I found 3.
There's this, on the internet, there's a list of like 30 hidden things in Gremlins that people, all those kind of, there's all these little hidden.
way.
Yeah, it's true. It's fun. He loved to do that, And there's a lot of casting jokes in it too. People that he loved from old movies, and they're playing parts in Gremlins thing, or just movies that Joe Dante loved, like the guy Scott Brady who plays the sheriff. He was the original Johnny Guitar, and a lot of people from the John Ford westerns are in it. Harry Carey Jr. He's the one who's like when in the bank scene when she says, "Maybe I put him in my spin dryer on high heat," the dog, and he's the guy with the pipe who goes, "That'd do it," he's like that guy. So he just cast all sorts of amazing character actors, and it's really done through a film lover's eyes.
I think it's just ruined Gremlins for me. I'm going to be watching it like that all the time now.
Hopefully
There must be something.
It enhanced Gremlins for you. It can't ruin it for you. Just adding things to it, hopefully.
But I like it because I like the Gremlins, and I like the mischief that they get up to, and the fact that they do get watered.
Well,
and
you can
they
see it on
cause
that level
chaos.
too. Yeah, I mean, it works on multiple levels. Just as a silly level, you can just watch it and just be a goof. Yeah,
I like being a goof.
yeah,
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that.
So what's it like working with the Gremlins that you were working with? You don't get a response, and I always
Well,
wonder.
no, but you do get a response. You do.
Not like a human. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I do, but I'm just going to gently and politely correct you and say you're mistaken, because the gizmo's right there in front of you, and it's going
yeah, but
blink, 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 and it's right there in front of you. Nothing's drawn in. It's just a little creature with cables coming out of it. And they said to me, "Whatever you want to do, you can do it. We've practiced for months before the shooting. If you want to scratch its head like it's a real thing, we'll make it react. If you see something, if you feed it something, it's got a crumb in its mouth, you want to move its, not after midnight, obviously, but you move it, get rid of the crumb or something that will react. Whatever you want to do." Treat it like it's a real animal, like it's a real pet. And if you want to pet it, you want to stroke it like you would stroke a cat or something. Whatever you want to do it, and you can improv totally, and we'll react. So it didn't have the cute voice, but it had the cute little kind of clicking and whirring. It was like, and it'd smile, and it had a little smiley face. It was a little shocking sometimes because they come up and they go, maybe he'd have a little grumpy face on. Like this. He has a grumpy face, and they go, Joe Donnie would go, "Hey, Wayless," because Chris Wayless is the guy who designed it. "Wayless, can we bring in the happy face?" And Wayless would go, "Sure, sure." And they come up to Gizmo, and they just rip his face off. They just rip his mouth off, and they put like a new happy one on. And I'm like, "What are you doing? You're ripping his face off." And they just peeled off, and then they would put the smile on, and they would glue it on, and 5 minutes later, and Gizmo's like this. smiling and ready to go. So, yeah, I mean, it was really cute. You got to realize something. When you're an actor, you have all sorts of weird things happen to you. You know, people say, like, what's it like working with puppets? Well, what's it like working with an actress you met 10 minutes ago, and now she's your wife, and your first scene is the love scene? You don't even know her, and you're making out with her. You're like, what is that? Like, hi, how are you? I mean, it's crazy. It's a crazy life. You're pretending things are happening. You're pretending people are shooting at you when they're not shooting at you. You're pretending you're in a different galaxy when you're not anywhere near a stage. You're pretending someone you've never met is your wife. And so you're pretending that this adorable thing is your pet. Not that huge a leap, really. Not that huge a leap.
Would you want one in real life?
Well, I've got one. I don't need, you know, I've got the actual gizmo at home in the closet. The real one, you know, the one that's alive. You have to feed it very carefully. You got to keep it in the closet where it's, you know, nice and dark and dry. So yeah, so Giz and I are still tight. Still tight. It's not a problem. That's what people want to believe anyway. So I let you guys believe it. I've got the real gizmo. We chat, we talk, speak Chinese occasionally. You do know that Mogwai is Chinese for monster, right? It's a Chinese word for monster. Yeah, that's where it comes from. Fun fact. It's Gremlins Fun Facts with Zach Galligan. How are you? Yeah, Mogwai means monster in Chinese. Yeah.
I never knew that. I feel like I'm learning so much about this film, despite the fact that I've seen this film like so many times.
That's what I'm trying to do here. Just
It's
trying to
awesome.
spread the gremlin knowledge.
Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask Zach? Oh, straight away over there's somebody with their hand up.
So the inevitable Gremlins 3 question. Congratulations, you know, this is the 25th anniversary of the very first time I got asked about Gremlins 3 in 1993. Yeah, someone came up to me and said, this is going to be a Gremlins 3. And I was like, yeah, it's 25 years ago today. It's amazing. So to answer the question, here's what's funny about, let's talk about Gremlins 2, just to put it in perspective. They worked on Gremlins 2 for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and called me up with about they called me up in February. We started shooting in May. They called me up in February. They're like, would you like to do Gremlins 2? I was like, are you doing it? They're like, yeah. You didn't know? I was like, no, I had no idea. They're like, are you free? I'm like, well, I am now. But I mean, like, I got maybe 10 weeks notice for Gremlins 2. So people are always like, people come to me and they're like, you're on the inside, Zach. What are they telling you? I'm like, I'm not on the inside. I'm just an actor for hire. I don't have anything to do with making the movies or, you know, like, I'm on the inside club, I'm inside the velvet ropes making all the Gremlins decisions. I have no idea. When I hear about, like, what's going on with Gremlins 3, it's usually because someone on Twitter says, have you seen the latest article about what's going on with Gremlins 3? I'm like, no. So one of you guys is telling me about what's happening with Gremlins 3. So it's funny because I come to these things, people are like, what's going on with Gremlins 3? I'm like, I don't know. Can someone forward me the latest article? Because it just doesn't really work that way. Like even with the new Star Wars movies, I believe they took Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher out to dinner, and they were like, we're doing new ones. Do you want to do it? But they were basically done for all intents and purposes. Not done, but I mean like written and planned and plotted and stuff like that. And they just kind of assume if they throw enough money at you that you're going to do them. And you know what? They're really quite correct about that. Dead on with that as far as that's concerned. So I mean, really, I mean, think about it. What's the negotiation with process with me going to be like? Hey, Zach, would you like to do Gremlins 3? Let me think about it. Yes. Okay, we're going to offer you this amount of money. Is that enough? Well, I'd like more. Well, you're not going to get it. You're going to take this. Okay, bye. So there you go. There's the Gremlins. We did it in about 40 seconds. And they know that, and I know that. So there's really no reason for there to be like this whole posturing and this. The fact of the matter is, I'm going to do it, and they're going to pay me when they're going to pay me, and they'll tell me when they're ready to do it, and I'll go, and I'll show up and go, hey, what's up, everyone? Hey, what's up, Giz? How are you? Great to see you. It's been a while. Put a few gray hairs. They'll probably put a few gray hairs in Gizmo, make him a little older. You know, I mean, seriously, because it'll probably be 30 years from now, most likely.
Very possibly. Do you reckon they'd CGI it, though? Or do you reckon they'd still use puppets?
Well, that, I think, is really largely responsible for the delay that we're seeing. I mean, they've remade and rebooted and sequelized practically every single thing from the 80s other than Gremlins and Back to the Future. And I think the Back to the Future thing is kind of self-explanatory, but the Gremlins one is basically the battle between how much it costs to do stuff with CGI and how much it costs to do stuff with puppets. And for those of you who don't know, it's probably triple to do puppets, to do in terms of cost. It's just so labor intensive, and you need people to operate it and to build them, and the animatronics is just way more expensive than people sort of sketching stuff, And so obviously the studio probably wants to do it all CGI, and the creative people want to do what's known as practical effects and animatronics because they think it looks better and it's more creative and whatnot. And they don't call it like show fun or show art. They call it show business. So people are going to want to, the people who are making the movie, the accountants and everything, they're going to want to do it for $100 million instead of $200 million. So if you have a $100 million gap, that's a big gap. And that's a gap that people are going to fight about, or squabble about, or entrench their positions and just kind of refuse to budge until somebody budges, and then that's what you're going to say. Hopefully they'll do, I think there's a compromise can always be found. I think you just do Gizmo as practical effects, and then maybe you do masses of Gremlins as CGI. The CGI is actually in things like the new Planet of the Apes movies. It's quite good, really, especially for large groups. But for the kind of one-on-one intimacy that you'd want to see between a human and a mogwai, whether it's me and Giz or whether it's a new younger person with a different or new mogwai or something like that, you want to have the range of expressiveness and believability and the interaction, being able to actually play off something that is in front of you instead of like, oh, so pretend that this bottle is this adorable thing. It's a lot more difficult to pretend that that bottle is an adorable thing than to pretend that an adorable thing is an adorable thing. It's just basic acting, it's acting physics. I guess you could say it's like a kind of just basic principle of acting.
Any more questions? Because we're just running out of time, so if we do... you there.
What words of wisdom did you get from working with Steven Spielberg?
What words of wisdom? Well, the funny thing about Spielberg was that he, both on Gremlins 1 and Gremlins 2, he was working on other films at the time because he was the executive producer and not the director. So he was doing Temple of Doom in 1983. So he really was only there for about, maybe 3 weeks, the last 4 weeks of shooting. And he was there, he came to the set, and he was kind of active, and looking around and kind of getting excited about what he saw. But it was very much Joe Dante's movie, and he's a respectful guy, so he kind of basically, he might throw in a suggestion or two, but, if Joe Dante was like, yeah, that doesn't really fit in with what we've been doing and what we've been shooting, Spielberg would really quite appropriately kind of, back off. And just sort of go, oh, okay, well, just throwing it out there. So it really wasn't his movie. I mean, it was kind of his movie in terms of profit sharing, but it wasn't his movie in terms of final cut and vision and style and tone and, Gremlins to a certain extent. I'll never forget the first time I saw a private screening they had for just me and Phoebe in this teeny little screening room. It had maybe like 12 seats in it. Just so we could see, know what we were talking about when we did the press junket that was coming up. And we watched it for the first time, no audience of any kind. It's very weird and different to see a film without an audience. If you have a whole theater full of people screaming and laughing and crying and enjoying the movie, it's a lot different than just seeing like a movie that you participated in by yourself, like just in silence. So when I first saw it, I was like, what the heck is this? I'm like in this massive cartoon. And they got to the bar scene, and the bar scene, the famous bar scene where Phoebe's trapped in there and they just do gag after gag after gag after gag. It was like 15 minutes long. They cut like 8 minutes out of it for the movie. It just went on and on. And it was like almost like a Warner Brothers cartoon, just like in the smack dab in the center of the movie. And finally, Joe Dante for Gremlins 2 was like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to start the movie with a cartoon and just get that out of the way, which he did. So when I saw it, in terms of the tone, I was like, I thought I was doing like an action movie. I didn't think I was doing like this kind of goofy horror comedy cartoon, because Phoebe and I are running around and I'm cutting people's, not people, but gremlins' head off and rescuing people and running here and getting in the car and stop and this and screaming and blah, blah, all of that. I thought it was going to be like Aliens. I didn't think it was going to be like Lizard of Oz in hell. I just was really kind of stunned by it. And I actually lied to Joe Dante. He's like, what do you think? Do you like it? I was like, oh, yeah, it's great. That's fantastic. I've never seen anything like it. And I was like, what the heck am I in? And I was said to Phoebe afterwards, we were driving home, I was like, is it any good? Like, is it any good? Like, did you like it? Like, we couldn't tell. We couldn't tell anything about it because it was just me and her, and we were just too close to it. And then we went to the screening at the Mann Chinese Theater. It was 1,800 people. And it was one of the loudest screenings I've ever been to, especially during the kitchen scene when Francis Lee McCain is killing everything. They throw the gremlin in the microwave and it explodes. And everyone's going, oh my God! Ah! Phoebe was sitting just in front of me. She turns around, she goes, I think we've got like a huge hit of the summer or something. Like we couldn't believe the audience response. So that's why you always have to kind of do a screening with a real, actual audience to see what it is that you have, because oftentimes you really don't have any idea what you have. You can think you've got the greatest film ever, and then you should show it for the audience. The audience is like falling asleep. Or you could think you have. I mean, wasn't Star Wars? People were like, they thought it was a bomb when it came out. I don't know if you know that, but like 2 weeks beforehand, the producer of the original Star Wars in '77, Gary Katz, was like, I just made like the worst movie ever made. He was walking around because it screened so poorly. And then they showed it, and it was, the biggest movie of all time. So you just don't know what you have until you have it, until it comes out.
That's very, very true. I'm so sorry. We've run out of time, Zach.
No worries.
But keep our fingers crossed for Gremlins 3.
Come to my table. Say hi.
And come and say hi. Everybody
Say
give
hi.
it up for Zach Galligan.
Yep.